And this is where I get in like really deep, like I'm really opening up with you guys. In this video, I wanted to finally open up to you guys about my anxiety, depression, and OCD. Hi, my name is Hannah, and if this is the first video that you're seeing from me, I upload beauty videos every Monday and Friday. I'm aware that this is not a beauty video because I'm going to actually be starting a series that I will tell you guys about in a second, but I just kind of wanted to explain myself to you guys. I do upload videos every Monday and Friday, usually beauty videos, so if that interests you, make sure to feel free to stick around and subscribe. Also, give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful. I hope you guys do. I used to wonder why I had anxiety and why it wouldn't go away, but now I know why. It's to be able to connect with people and help them feel like they're not alone. Until about last year, the only people who knew about my anxiety was my mom, my dad, and then my doctor. My brother and sister-in-law, I feel like knew the basics that I had anxiety, but not too much in depth. I didn't really tell other people because I wanted to give the front that I was normal, not saying. I feel like recently talking about mental health disorders has become a little bit more accepted, so that's good, but I didn't want to give the appearance to other people that I had problems with my mental health. I just wanted to seem normal. I wanted to create the series to explain anxiety to people who don't have it, but also kind of form a community with people who do have anxiety or other mental disorders. As I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about depression and OCD as well, to kind of form a community so you guys, don't feel like you're alone. There's other people who do struggle with these disorders. And I know, at least for me personally, it can feel really alone and crippling because there seems to be a lot of people who don't understand it, and it's just really hard. So this is going to be the first video in the series, and I'm going to be opening up about my struggles with anxiety at first, like whenever I first became aware of it. So I'm going to be talking about my high school years. I wanted to create a series, and I'm going to have new videos every Monday and kind of share the journey as well as different things that have helped me as well. So I just really want this series to be as helpful as possible. I will link the other ones in the description box. If, once the second one is up, I will be linked in the description box, that kind of thing. But as I mentioned, I'm going to be uploading videos every Monday on this little series opening up about anxiety, depression, and OCD. Another thing that I feel is important to mention, obviously, I'm not a licensed doctor. I am just sharing my personal experiences. If you're having problems with anxiety, depression, or OCD, any combination of those, or any mental disorder of any sort, I strongly urge you to talk to your doctor and also to talk to someone in your personal life, because getting medical help is important, but also having a support system is also very important with situations like this as well. So I strongly urge you to reach out. I wanted to kind of get that little disclaimer aside before opening up about my anxiety. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be discussing my anxiety whenever I first noticed it and that kind of thing. Whenever I first noticed anxiety, it was as a result of, it was a side effect of a steroid that I was given as, medication to combat bronchitis. I had bronchitis, I believe this was my junior year in high school, so this was about 8 or 9 years ago, and I just had really bad results from it. I remember I had either taken 2 dosage, I think it was like twice a day, so maybe I took one in the morning and one at night, but I had only taken like 1 or 2 doses. I remember I wasn't too far into the medicine, like taking it. With any drug, there's obviously side effects, and unfortunately, this is how my body reacted. Obviously, I'm not saying that this is how everyone reacts. People react differently to drugs, but unfortunately, this is how my body reacted. I say that the steroid, I also have my notes over here, so if I'm kind of like looking at this, I just want to make sure that I, make everything into a cohesive story that makes sense. I say that the steroids didn't give me anxiety because looking back, I can see how I had OCD even as a kid. As I mentioned, this was, several years ago, so I can't quite remember if I had anxiety as a kid, but I do remember that I had OCD as a child, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So as I mentioned, I had taken about 1 or 2 dosage of this steroid because of my bronchitis, and I remember that night that my mind was racing. I don't think I got any sleep. I remember I was trying to, sleep on my bed. Then I remember I went to the couch as well. It was really bad also because this was at nighttime, so obviously my parents were asleep, so I felt very alone, and I am a Christian, so I was able to pray to the Lord. This is kind of a separate thing. I can get on so many tangents, so obviously the Lord is very important on this, but I believe that there are further measures that sometimes need to be taken with anxiety and other mental disorders as well. So remember, my mind was racing. I can't remember if I woke up my parents or not, probably, just because with anxiety, the way that I can explain it is I guess constantly being really stressed and tense, but like the next level, and it never really subsides. So whenever you're really stressed out about a big project at work or something, for example, it's like that but times 10, and it's just, that's the best way that I can kind of describe it. So my mind was racing at night, and I remember I was thinking about all of the bad things that I had done. Obviously, sin is wrong and stuff like that, but I was thinking about things that I did like literally years prior. It's important to confess your sins. I am aware of that, and also to ask for forgiveness from other people, but this was like a next level, and I was giving myself constant guilt about this. So as I mentioned, I was in school. This was my junior year. I don't think I got any sleep at night. So I remember the next morning, I'm pretty sure I told my mom about it, and she automatically kind of suggested, like, let's stop taking the medication. So I didn't take any more after that, and I believe we did consult my physician. So I'm pretty sure, as I mentioned, this was about 8 or 9 years ago, so I can't remember the entire sequence of events, but I'm pretty sure that we did go to the doctor afterwards and kind of told him about the situation, so he was aware. I did stop taking the medicine immediately, but it took me a while to go back to normal, where I wasn't constantly thinking about those thoughts of all the things I'd done wrong before. Like, it took me a few months. Like, it was really bad there for a second, as in for a while. I remember I would be really anxious in class. It would be hard for me to make it the entire day at school without calling my mom and talking to my mom, because as I mentioned before, I'm very close to both of my parents, and I will say that both of them have, throughout my entire struggle with anxiety and other mental issues, they have really been there for me, and I would not be able to get through this without them. Especially my mom is kind of more the sympathetic one, and then my dad is more of the tough love, and I feel like you kind of need a balance of both. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll go into that a little bit more later. It took me a while to get over the fact of beating myself up with guilt about things I had done in the past, but not just the normal amount of guilt from feeling bad about something. As I mentioned, I felt like I had to tell my mom about it as a coping mechanism and getting over it, and I feel like that was also a little bit of a mix of anxiety and OCD. OCD, if you didn't already know, is Obsessive-Compulsive disorder. I would describe my anxiety, as I mentioned, as being really tense and stressed out about something, but next level. It was like an ongoing feeling. Since this was several years ago, I can't remember specific panic attacks that I had, but I'm sure that I did have them. I will get into that in a future video, because I can obviously remember my more recent panic attacks. Also, a side effect of this drug was that I fell into depression. I was really down. I remember that at one point I wanted to be homeschooled because I didn't want to be around people, and like I said, it was really hard for me to be alone, essentially. Like, yes, I was around my teachers and classmates, but they didn't know about my anxiety and depression, and they couldn't help me. So as I mentioned, I wasn't really telling other people. I don't know. I felt alone, and this is where I get in like really deep. Like, I'm really opening up with you guys. I know a lot of my friends, or not a lot, but I feel like people in my personal life now do know about my anxiety, but I'm not sure if they know about my depression and OCD. So I haven't really talked about this with, a lot of people, other than my parents and probably my doctor as well. So with depression, I never wanted to end my life, but I do remember wishing that I could just go to heaven, because I was tired of feeling like this all the time. And then once again, I want to say, if you're struggling with these thoughts, talk to someone, talk to your doctor, and also talk to someone in your personal life, because you do not have to go through this alone. This is a very serious issue. I just wanted to be very open and transparent with all of this with you guys, to just really try to help you guys out. So that's kind of all I have to say about depression at the moment. It is a real thing, and I feel like it is more strongly accepted. I am a Christian, so I do you know, I have been saved and trust in the Lord, confessed my sins, and I believe that his son did come to die. That's kind of a mumbled version of salvation, but I hope that helps you out. If you have been wondering about that, I can go into a whole separate video on my testimony. It was really hard, and it was more of a season of being sad, because I feel like with depression, like obviously everybody has down days, I know that, but this was like a constant feeling, like weeks. And just with the anxiety and the OCD, I feel like that coupled together really kind of set me into the state of depression. And it just, you kind of feel like get into this feeling of it's never going to end. And yes, you know, you can say, well, and there are ways of coping with it. I know I have a really good life. I have super supportive parents. I live in America. I feel like I have a pretty good life in general, but that doesn't mean that you still can't have, you know, depression. So with depression, you kind of get, or at least with how I felt personally, you kind of get to the feeling of this is never going to go away, which, as I mentioned, my anxiety hasn't gone away, but I have found a deal of coping with it. But whenever you're having really bad anxiety and you're stuck in your head, basically, for lack of a better way of explaining it, it can just get kind of a hopeless feeling. And it's just, my junior year of high school was really hard for me. Now I'm going to get into talking about OCD. Which, as I mentioned, is obsessive-compulsive disorder. I think that everyone is a little particular about random things. Like some people may, you know, wash dishes in a certain order, for example, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have OCD. The way that I see it is if it's hard to move on without performing the task, whether they think something bad is going to happen, if they don't, or if they can't stop thinking about it, that is whenever it becomes OCD. OCD can be extremely debilitating, and there's levels, but my junior year of high school was particularly difficult because I was going through anxiety and depression and OCD at the same time. So this kind of brings me back to the beginning of the video. Like I said, looking back at it, obviously I don't think that the drug gave me these mental disorders. I really hate how that sounds, but it's what they are. But I feel like before that I did kind of have tendencies of OCD, but I just, you know, it was like funny or like cute or whatever. And it didn't seem like as debilitating. But so for example, I remember for the longest time, the drawers, like, you know, the drawers in the kitchen or like in my bedroom or something like that, they would all have to be closed, and it was hard for me to move on until they were. I don't remember all the things that I had before that about OCD, because this was a little while ago, but I do remember that I had a debilitating feeling if I didn't perform that compulsion. So I remember, for example, I was sitting at the kitchen table and like the drawer, like the silverware drawer would still be open, and I was like, yo, can you close that? But I would literally like get up from my seat, close the drawer before I went on with my meal. Like that, I don't know, does that kind of make sense to you? And I feel like if you don't have OCD, or if you haven't heard of this, like it sounds really stupid, and that is stupid is a mean term. It sounds really ridiculous. Is that a little nicer? It sounds really ridiculous, and I know it is, but as I mentioned, that is, to me, is a sign that it's OCD, because I couldn't move on. Like I couldn't stop thinking about it until I closed the drawers. And that brings me into a book that really helped me with OCD. I'm pretty sure it's called Mind Lock. I don't have it with me to show, but I will link it in the description box down below if I can find it. Also, I will try to remember to show that to you guys in my next video talking about anxiety, you know, as this is a series, as I mentioned, and it really did help me out. I didn't read the book in its entirety, and I read it out of order, but I do think that it helped because there's different chapters, you know, coping mechanisms and stuff like that, and I really think that that book helped me. It took me a little while to not necessarily go back to normal because I still have anxiety, as I mentioned, and I think that it's just going to be something that I deal with for the rest of my life, but it took me a while to get to the point where I could manage it well. Junior year was worse than my senior year because it was the onset of all these things, but I did still have anxiety my senior year. This is another important thing that I wanted to point out. I remember realizing that I would much rather be physically sick than be mentally sick. Because for example, if you broke your arm, it would be really painful and really bad, but you could deal with that pain. When it's in your head, it gets physically exhausting because my mind would not stop running, constantly be worried or anxious about something. So being anxious about an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Also another thing, with the drawers, I remember I would have to like close them in a certain pattern. I had weird compulsions, I feel like a lot of them are. So if you aren't as familiar with OCD, it's not necessarily having an extremely tidy room or like an immaculate house, like you don't have any dust anywhere, because I am not the most organized person. I'm very much into lists and stuff like that, but it's not like my room had to be like completely clean, and I would clean it 8 hours a day or anything like that. My specific compulsion at the time was like closing drawers. So that's another thing that I did want to mention. Not obviously everybody's OCD is different, like they have compulsions about different things. And that's another thing that helped me with the book, is because it tells stories, so you can kind of see like, oh, that's also ridiculous. So other people have ridiculous thoughts as well. Just kind of going back to why I wanted to create this video, to kind of form a community and just to really talk about it and hopefully educate people who aren't as aware with anxiety, depression, or OCD. And also if you do have any of those disorders, just to make you really feel like you're not alone and that you can get through this. I feel like I'm leaving out a lot of important things, but I did kind of type out my notes because I really wanted to make this a logical video and just really explain it well to you guys. But in my next video, I'm going to go through the process of anxiety and OCD throughout my college years. Also, I wanted to remind you guys that you don't know what people are going through, so treat them with kindness. Mental disorders are a real thing, and it's important to get help. So that's kind of all I have to say right now. Obviously I had so much anxiety even about this video, opening up with anxiety, but I feel like it's really important and that it needs to be done, and I can finally be open up with you guys about my anxiety, my depression, and my OCD. As I mentioned, I still want to do beauty videos, but I just really want to be able to connect with you guys and be really transparent. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, once again, feel free to stick around and subscribe. I post videos every Monday and Friday. Also, make sure you hit the bell notifications next to the subscribe button so that you'll get notified and it'll go into your inbox whenever I upload the video. You don't want to miss my series on anxiety and depression and OCD. I know I've mentioned that several times, but I'm just really excited to finally be sharing this with you guys. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in my next video.